Well, welcome back to another analysis behind the news this week. A couple of real quick things before I get into what I promised I would talk about more this week. You see a lot of newsprint, time on the air with television and everything else relative to Donald Trump. Everybody's saying he's saying outrageous things. Well, yes, he is. But he's not quite saying them the way he should. Kind of gets him in trouble. I don't know that we can trust Donald Trump any more than we can trust any of the other Republican candidates. Be that as it may, he got into a little bit of trouble in a Donnybrook with Senator McCain. Problem that I have with Trump on his criticism of McCain is that it did not go far enough. Now, probably some of you are going to be taken aback by what I'm going to say, but my public relations man told me I should not call McCain a scumbag. Maybe I could get away with calling him a traitor. Nonetheless, I'd like to call him just about every name in the book, because this man is a traitor. And by giving aid and comfort to the enemy kind of treason. I want everybody to go back into the archives of my videos that I give every week and look at number 58. You can scroll down to the bottom on YouTube and go to number 58. Now, the numbers may change every week. As we add one, those numbers go up, I think, on that list. But number 58 is McCain's collusion with the troubles in the Middle East, saying one thing and doing something entirely something else. And I document how that is being done. Has been done. McCain's been involved in this for a long, long time of unsettling the Near East. But my real personal problem with McCain was his behavior as a prisoner of war. Most people don't know that he admitted his guilt for war crimes, and those tapes were played through the prisons to our other American prisoners of war to demoralize them. He gave over 30 broadcasts on the air for the enemy. All sorts of things like that. The man cooperated with the enemy to get better treatment. It was not the reason that he gives that he was the son of an admiral and therefore was given better treatment as a propaganda stunt. There are those that were prisoners. There are those who have done investigations on this thing who are very adamant that McCain cooperated with the enemy. He was no hero by any stretch of anyone's imagination. Go online and Google it. I'm sure you will be able to start to find various documentaries on this particular thing. It's never gotten into the mainstream press. But at any rate, McCain is not what he appears to be. Never has been, never will be, no matter how much he loses his temper when you start to bring these things up. Another thing that I want to draw your attention to is this, and that is the Iran deal that has just been concluded. No one seems to be talking about the ramifications of Iranian oil coming out into the free market and the consequences of that. Now, I'm not saying this is something that we should stop or anything else relative to a free enterprise, hands-off kind of economy. But all I'm doing is trying to point out something, and that's this, that when the Iranian oil hit the market, the price of oil went down. Now, the price of oil has to rise to a certain level for American companies to explore and extract, to drill, and whatever else, fracking, whatever else that they do. It has to reach a certain level for American oil to find a profit. I know of one major company, because of oil going below $50 a gallon can't make a profit. They just can't. So it retards their operation. They have to lay people off and that sort of thing. So what does this do to the American economy? The settlement with Iran and its ramifications is going to hurt the American economy from an oil standpoint. And we know that the oil industry has done a lot relative to sustaining the American economy. It's one of the bright spots in our economy in the last, well, since 2008. And so it has driven a number of other things. If that is retarded, then the rest of the support economy behind it will also retard. So you might take that into consideration. In fact, I'm trying to find somebody right now to write an article about that particularly. So those of you who are watching this, who are authors, may want to research this a little bit and see what are the effects on the American economy, not Iran's economy, but the American economy relative to this deal that's before the Congress. And we could spend a lot of time talking about that too, because Obama has basically said he doesn't care what Congress will do. He only wants what the UN will do with this particular treaty. So much for that. But let's get to what I wanted to talk about this week. And that is the Dodd-Frank bill is a failure. You saw that in my last week's video. One of the things that it has given rise to is increased costs in your local banking. They have to make up these costs. The Dodd-Frank regulations, this bill, has increased the regulations within the banking industry to such an extent that they have let me back up and say that they've employed nationally over the last few years 5% increase in their employment in the banks. 50% increase in those employees they have to hire to comply with banking regulations. In other words, they hire clerks and tellers and accountants and so on and so forth. But they also have to hire people to make sure they're complying with all the regulations. Though that employment's gone up 50%, but overall it's 5%. You see, so it's very inordinate amount of hiring in the banks that they have to make up for. They don't get any money by complying with regulations. They only make money lending and so on and so forth, and providing checking services and savings accounts and that sort of thing. They don't make any money complying with regulations. But those are the individuals that they have to hire most of. And it's an interesting thing in this article I showed you last week. It said this. I didn't get a chance to read it. Before Dodd-Frank's passage, former Senator Chris Dodd, in other words, the co-author, said that, quote, "No one will know until this is actually in place how it works," unquote. Kind of reminiscent of Pelosi and her comment about Obamacare. We have to pass it before we can find out what's in it. Here's another article on Dodd-Frank titled "Dodd-Frank's Nasty Double Whammy." And I told you that it's caused a lot of closures of banks. Just to give you an idea, according to the Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation, 1,341 commercial banks have disappeared since 2010. Remarkably, only 2 new banks have been chartered. By comparison, in the quarter century before the financial crisis, roughly 2,500 new banks were chartered. Even during the Great Depression of the 1930s, an average of 19 new banks a year were chartered. But since 2010, only 2, and yet 1,341 have gone out of business. It's a real problem. Now, let me end with this one little paragraph out of the Wall Street Journal for Monday, July 13th, because it really hit me. It says that Athens, this is talking about Greece now, Europe's ultimatum to Greece, demanding full capitulation as the price of any new bailout, marks the failure of a rebellion by a small debt-ridden country because its lenders' austerity policies after Germany flexed its muscles and offered Athens a choice between obeisance or destruction. Now, what if you took out Greece and substituted the United States? What if you took out the European Union and substituted China? Because Greece is under the EU and all that bailout from the EU. What has China been doing for the United States? Has it not bailed us out by the buying of bonds and our debt and that sort of thing? What if China one day came to us with the same ultimatum? You do this or you default and we literally take over. It's something that no one really thinks about as to the kinds of controls that can come about by those that pick up your paper. In other words, your bonds and your debt. They literally control you after that. And that's why we aren't dealing with China the way we should be dealing with China. Until next week, we'll see you then.